What is up, humans of the cardboard? Welcome back to Just Nuts, guys. If you have not been paying attention over the past week, we got a killer insane card revealed for the new structure deck Alba Strike. This thing looks crazy. This looks like the best structure deck in a long time. I know we've had a couple of, I don't want to say full duds, well, Iceblade was a dud, but this one looks really solid. I think a legit tier 1 deck is coming out of this structure deck, or will derive for some of the cards in this structure deck. Maybe Despia, maybe something else, but we'll talk about that as we zoom through today, because I'm going to throw a bunch of different options at you from the structure deck Alba Strike, and specifically, of course, the new branded fusion. If you don't know what this card says, it says fusion summon one fusion monster that lists Fallen of Albaz as material from your extra deck using 2 monsters from your hand, deck, or field as fusion material. Deck's the big one there, obviously, even though I didn't emphasize it the way I said that. Whatever. You can only activate 1 branded fusion per turn. You cannot special summon monsters from the extra deck the turn you activate this card, except for fusion. So hard one's your turn, and it locks you. It says you cannot summon anything from extra deck except fusions that whole turn you use it, but that is not a restriction. And you might be saying, John, this only summons monsters that take Fallen of Albaz as material. That's only like 4 monsters in the game of Yu-Gi-Oh! No. Okay, because there's 2 very important monsters you need to keep in mind. We'll look at those in a sec. But the first one is Albion, the branded dragon. We have not really seen this card come up, but what he says is on fusion summon, when he's fusion summoned, you can fusion summon a level 8 or lower fusion monster from your extra deck, except for himself, by banishing the materials listed on it from your hand, field, and or grave. So he is your Albaz target, and then he gets you another fusion using the materials that were already used for him, or materials you may have already set up in grave. So you have that, and you also have the newly revealed Lubellion. He says when he's fusion summoned, you can discard a card to fusion summon a level 8 or lower fusion from extra deck, except for himself, by shuffling fusion materials listed on it into the deck from among your cards on field, in your graveyard, or in your banished zone. So some of the cards you're going to be sending are going to get banished already, and then he lets you shuffle them back in. So you can get like double value off of both of these cards, but they take Albaz as material, and so they allow you to keep extending into some other fusion monsters that you might not have thought would work with this card already. So now that we have a little bit of context, also do not forget we're getting Springen's Kit in this structure deck. This card is essentially a Rhoda. It's a 1-for-1, not a +1. You can add a branded spell or trap that's banished in deck or engraved from deck to your hand, and then place a card from your hand on the bottom of the deck. So like, yes, you do. It's only a 1-for-1. It's not a +1, but still, you're getting a pretty insane card. So I think it's still pretty good. You also have Alba. Don't forget, when Alba is summoned, he can add a branded spell or trap from deck to hand. He is a legit +1, and we have branded opening, which is essentially just emergency teleport for Aluber. So you just summon Aluber straight out of the deck, and then he gets you. Of course, the branded fusion. So you have a lot of ways, especially in that branded, in the Despia deck, to get access to this card really easily. Plus, also don't forget, technically you can Verte for this card, although I don't think that's great, because if you use Verte, you're going to be able to summon 1 of those fusion monsters that takes Albaz, and then you are locked from summoning, period, for the rest of the turn. So I don't think that card's really the greatest with this card, but whatever. All right, so let's get into some targets here. Of course, we go through these. We start off with the other monster in the structure deck. This structure deck has so many cards that are just going to be like immediately played in a lot of cool decks. But we have Mirrorjade. This card's really cool. The main thing he does is a quick effect. He can send a fusion that lists Fallen of Albaz from extra deck to grave to then just non-targeting banish any monster on the field. Now he can't use it the next turn after he uses it, but it's pretty good. And also, if he ever leaves the field by your opponent's effect or battle, you can then just wipe their whole board on the end phase of that turn. Pretty cool, pretty powerful monster. Definitely something to keep in mind. He's really strong. Next up is Despian Qua or Redis. This is a really kind of like sticky card. It's an annoying card to deal with. He can change your stats, so it's hard to summon something that's big and will beat over him or anything like that. And he also floats, of course, so definitely a pain. And what's really good is, like, I think Despia probably has the most synergy with these new cards, just because you're able to like make not necessarily like crazy boards with a million interruptions, but like 1 or 2 interruptions with a couple of sticky monsters and follow-up on follow-up. Despia like pluses the most off of this engine, and I think that's what gives it probably the best chance to be meta after this stuff comes out. Next up is El Shaddai Window. You shouldn't be surprised by this. Do not forget that the way this is essentially functioning is by summoning Albion or Lubellion first. You're just using them. You're just using your branded fusion as like a foolish burial, right? Because if you make Lubellion, you can dump any dark monster in the game from deck to grave. Okay, obviously there are a ton of good targets there. Same thing with Albion, because you can dump any light monster from deck to grave. Those are the two most popular attributes in the entire game of Yu-Gi-Oh! So you have some really good sendable targets there, and Shaddolls are no exception. So you can send a Shaddol, potentially get a Shaddol effect to pop off, depending on how big of an engine or which utility ones you want to play, and just get to a window. Pretty good. Seems good to me. Next up is Red Eyes Dragoon. Now this one's a weird one because you're like, John, we are not. How are you supposed to get Dark Magician and Red Eyes in grave? Well, you don't, because Dragoon also can just take any dragon effect monster. It doesn't actually have to take Red Eyes Black Dragon itself. It can take any dragon effect, which is crazy. And then if you just play something like the Hex Sealed, which is like, it's a light monster, but essentially it can count as any material for a fusion summon. So if you use that and send that when you're summoning Albion, then when you banish it, it can count as the Dark Magician, and then the Albaz himself is a dragon, and that will count for this. So you will not have the pop effect, I believe, for your Dragoon, but you will have, can't be destroyed by card effects, can't be targeted by card effects, and he'll have obviously his Omni Negate effect. So still a powerful monster you can go into to just threaten your opponent. Next up is a more offensive option. We're not going to see a ton of these, but this is definitely one of them. Blue Eyes Tyrant Dragon. It takes a Blue Eyes plus any dragon. Same thing as before. If you just send the Light Hex Sealed, that will count as your Blue Eyes, and then Albaz himself will count as the dragon when you're banishing him or shuffling him back in. So blah blah blah. So then from there, yeah, he's unaffected by all trap cards. So depending on the kind of deck you're playing against, this card is a house. I mean, you play against like Altergeist with this card, and they weren't able to set up, or you're able to have something to interact with, keeping the Steel Quicius from bouncing you. You kind of got him right in the cheeks, right? Because this card can attack all monsters your opponent controls once each. Also, once returned at the end of the damage step of this card battled, you can target a trap in your graveyard and set it back to your spell and trap zone. I guess that could come up, but I don't think it will specifically in this variant. Whatever. Next up is Destroyer Phoenix Enforcer. This is specifically more so for a more pure hero build. I don't know how legit this is. I think heroes already play bricks, and I don't know if they want to add any more bricks like the Albaz or anything like that on top of what they're playing already. Plus, it locks them up going through any of their link lines. They have to stick to fusions only for the turn. I don't know if they want to do that, but it is something that can help them set up the Phoenix Enforcer, so I figured it was worth noting. Predaplant Dragon Stapelia. You'll see there's definitely some combos where just with this card and maybe one other card in hand, you can end on like Dragostapelia plus an in-archetype fusion monster, which is actually pretty good because this card is essentially just a walking infinite impermanence that also lowers your opponent's monster's level to 1 immediately when it gives it a counter. So you mess with levels, so even as far as extending through stuff, if it's a synchro or a Exceed based strategy, like maybe Virtual World, you can negate a monster on the field but also make it level 1, and that actually makes it harder for them to even use as material to like keep synchro or Exceed climbing, which is actually pretty useful. So definitely a card worth noting. You also have Draco Necro Nether Soul Dragon. Just keep in mind, guys, we're just using these as Foolish Burial a lot of the time. So you don't even necessarily have to be looking for archetypes that just needed a really good a way to summon their in-archetype boss monster. Sometimes you just need a way to get your stuff engraved. And obviously zombies are a prime example of that. You can send, like, I saw a really cool example where if you open, like, if you open... Oh my gosh, I'm trying to think here. If you open, what's her name? Necroworld Banshee for zombies. She can like quick banish herself to set up Zombie World, and your Brand of Fusion. Brand of Fusion can send Bloom, or Gloom, Glow Up Bloom, whatever. The little plant that's going to summon Ballardrock, but normally would add it because you don't have the field spell. But then you can chain Necroworld because it is a quick effect to then set up, and then on resolution you can summon him. And so you end up on like, I think it's Albion plus, oh my god, I'm going crazy. You end up on like Albion, Necroworld, Nether Soul Dragon, Draco Necro, another Soul Dragon, whatever, and the Ballard Rock with the field spell up off of just 2 cards. It's not the craziest thing in the world, but it is another way to help you get access to that stuff, and I know that archetype definitely needs a better way to do that. You also have Chimera Tech Rampage Dragon. I believe this card becomes a 1-card OTK because you can just send Cyber Dragon hers and then get a search and then set up pretty much an easy synchro into the Rampage and just kind of send 2, pop some back row, you know, and go to town there. Next up is Buster Blader, the Dragon Destroyer Swordsman. This one's kind of weird because, like, yes, this card helps you make him, but if you're using this card to make him, you can't summon Buster Dragon that turn. The synchro that turns everything into dragon, and that takes away a lot of his utility. But I guess if you're playing against a dragon deck, then maybe it's still worth. So I don't know. I mean, it's a weird one for sure, but I don't know. I figured it was worth summoning or mentioning. It is still like a really house of a boss monster for an archetype that needs help summoning it a little easier. Next up, we have Borreload Furious Dragon. This one's kind of cool because if you send the... I don't remember the name of it, but I think it's the level 7. It's not technically a rocket monster, but when it's sent to the graveyard, it adds any rocket. You could send it with... obviously Albaz to summon out the first fusion, then you can fusion into the Borreload Furious and still have the rocket, get like the rocket search, which is pretty good. So you'll have like a Dryadant. This guy has follow-up potential in grave, and of course you search the rocket and have it normal summoned. And I know rockets don't really have a normal summon per se, but like there's still some interesting stuff you could do from that point. Of course, we have Dual Avatar Empowered Mitsujaku and the Kongyo. This archetype stinks, but I will say I did see one combo and I was like, oh, does Branded Fusion just become like a 1 or a 1.5 card, like at least 2 of these and some others, like, and a little bit of extra value? Yeah, like these cards don't have like legitimately amazing interruptions or anything, but they're fine for what they are, and at least helping a deck like this that I thought was cool on release, but like playing them, they just like don't do anything. They just summon fusion monsters that just like don't do enough. But they get a little easier, like better at summoning out their stuff. Invoked Caliga is pretty cool because if you can just send Alistair the Invoker or a card that can copy its name, you just banish it with the Albaz, of course, and you can summon this guy if you didn't want to do something like Dragoon. So just like a meta call or maybe a budget call for you know, whatever you're playing. Millennium Eyes Restrict, again, if you can copy Relinquished or just send Relinquished itself, you're doing it. This card's actually a pretty good interruption. I know people have only really used it for like instant fusion as like a protection through like certain, like doing certain combos, but this card actually is a pretty good interruption, not gonna lie. So pretty good. Mysterion the Dragon Crown. This is another generic card you could summon. He's not the greatest because his effect is kind of specific. It says if a monster uses its activated effect to special summon itself or a monster or monsters with its same original type, you can target one of those special summon monsters and banish it. Also banish all monsters from the field with its same original type. So it's kind of a specific effect. It requires like kind of matchup dependency on the, like, you need to be playing a deck that's has to play right into this, but it is still like an interesting monster. It's big, it's going to be pretty easy to summon, and it gives you a way to like generically make use of like putting any spellcaster monster into your grave, which is, you know, not too shabby. And the last card we have here that I figured I might as well highlight is Predaplant Chimera Phlasia. This card is, again, more of a going second option, kind of like the Blue Eyes one we saw earlier, than a going first option, because it can just target a monster on the field with a level less than or equal to this. This is level 7, and just banish it, just permanent banish it. That's actually a pretty good removal. Also, this card gains attack, or it lowers the attack and gains attack when it battles something. And of course, during the next standby phase, after this card is sent to the graveyard, you can add any polymerization or fusion spell from your deck to your hand. That could be another branded fusion for follow-up, or that could be something like a super poly, depending on the format and depending on if you're playing good super poly targets in your extra. So gives you a little bit extra utility and follow-up there. I figured this one was kind of worth mentioning just for specific scenarios. But that I think is it. I kind of skimmed through most of the fusion monsters in the entire game, but I might have missed a few here that have some interesting little applications. So feel free to let me know in the comment section if there's any other fusion monsters and archetypes that you think could make good use of this, even if it's just the foolish burial aspect of this, or if it's something else. So just let me know down below. I'd be curious to hear your thoughts there. Thank you so much for watching. As always, subscribe to the channel if you want to see more stuff like this down the line. And I'll see you in the next one, I guess. Peace.